Hey, what's up, y'all? This is Astro doing the podcast on Ween for October 6, 2018. Hey, what's up, y'all? So, today we're going to be talking about a legend, an icon, a visionary, a magical being, a music god, the king of pop, Michael motherfucking Jackson. Okay. Oh my God. I love this man so much. Oh, I love Michael so much. I grew up on Michael. Like my family's super into Michael Jackson ever since ABC. That's all I remember hearing growing up is Michael Jackson, and we just kept up with him, all his music. It's just big fans. My family, huge fans of Michael. So when he passed, it felt like someone I knew passed, and I cried so hard. And I was so confused because it came out of nowhere. And I remember the whole "this is it" and him prepping for it. So I'm like, what the he has a tour? What the hell? What's going on? It was just so, it was such a hectic ass day. I didn't want to believe it because back in those days, they said if TMZ says it, TMZ was kind of like the National Enquirer a little bit back in 2009. So we're like, yeah, it might be right, but it's probably wrong. He ain't dead. And a lot of remember that decade, the 2000s? A lot of times they said that people died and they really didn't die. So I was like, why are they doing that? That's not even funny. And it ended up being true. And I just ran upstairs and cried. I really did. I was so heartbroken. Saw the funeral. I'll never watch a celebrity funeral ever again because of his funeral. I cried throughout that whole thing. Mad hard too. It's my brothers who passed really liked Michael. So I think it was a little bit of that. And of course, because he was literally one of my favorite artists of all time, ever. And when you get kind of close to someone and you're musical as well, I don't know if you guys know, but I sing and write songs as well. When you're musical as well, you feel like you have a connection with the person. Music is extremely universal, and it's kind of it's soulful, and you connect through music. And so I really felt like I connected with a lot of my artists and my favorite artists, and Michael was definitely one of them. So when he passed, that really broke my heart. Gave me back memories of my brothers who passed, and it was tough. I was really hard. And beyond that, just thinking about all the fucked up shit he had to go through, all the lies that people told on him, and how people just ran away with it. It was just really a sad situation. And for him to die the way he did, it was just heartbreaking. So, I don't know. It was really hard for me to deal with. It was. And I can't even imagine what his fans, not fans, I'm a fan of his, but his family, and his friends, people who actually knew him, how they felt about it. I know they were so heartbroken. So sad. So, yeah, I don't know if I need to introduce Michael because everyone knows Michael Jackson, but I'll still do it. Michael Jackson was born August 29th, 1958 in Gary, Indiana, to a huge musical family. He's sisters with Janet, who is an icon and a legend herself. And with the Jackson 5, of course, which he was a part of. He was a lead singer of. And, his father was into music, never broke out into it, but, he saw the talents within his kids, and, his kids wanted to join the band, so they went with it. And so him and his brothers created the Jackson 5. And they made some amazing songs, but Michael always was the spotlight because he can dance so good and he sung so soulful for a kid. I think they started when he was 6 or 7, and he was just such a soulful kid. He had a voice of a grown man who went through the blues and went through life. It was insane. Sung with so much conviction, and even when his voice was a little bit softer and more flexible to pop, it was still, he sung with so much soul and conviction still. You know what I mean? Sung with so much conviction. Like, you believed what he said when he sung. Amazing singer. And so he grew up, became solo, made his own music. Off the Wall, of course, a legendary, like, amazing album. But what really made him into, like, even I can't even say international superstar, because he was international superstar in the 70s too. But what really kind of like made him the king of pop, I'll say, was Thriller. Thriller really, that's still the most sold album, with like naturally sold album. I forgot how much it sold, but yeah, like it sold a lot of copies all around the world. And you know, a lot of people said, like, I know there was an article saying that the Eagles' Greatest Hits album was the most sold album, but they're including streams, they're not including like actual real records sold and streams. You know what I mean? And so I don't care what anyone has to say, still putting Thriller up there as the most album sold. You know, this is like before streaming, before social media. He was all over the place. And him and a couple of artists like literally ran the 80s, you know what I mean? With him being in the forefront. Classic albums. Bad was classic. Dangerous, classic. Like, just continuously classic albums. And even when he came back with Invincible, that album was bomb too. Like, he's just literally a musical genius, a performing genius, a dancing genius. Like, dancers all look up to him. Just that natural soul within his body that he had. He's just literally the king of pop. Unfortunately, he dealt with people accusing him of child molestation. He tried to pay it off so they can leave him alone, but then they tried to use that over his head. He ended up winning the cases, but that even just the reputation, or just that being attached to him, that he had to go to court because people accused him of child molestation, that just hung over his head. You know, people harassed him, paparazzi harassed him, and you know, that really, like, they tried to mess up his legacy that way. I don't know who they are, but it was just tough on him. But then he was getting his win back and decided to do the This Is It tour, right? Short tour. He wanted to do, it was supposed to be his last tour too that he was going to do. And he's going to go to a couple of cities and kind of wrap his tour up that way, right? And he was practicing for it. And everyone that said he was practicing for it, like, he did an amazing job. He was performing like he was in his like 20s again, or 30s, you know what I mean? It's like in his prime, performing his ass off. And the day before he passed, the 24th, you know, he worked till midnight and was, you know, practiced to midnight, and then went back home to sleep. Then on June 25th, 2009, Michael Jackson stopped breathing while attempting to sleep. And he was under the care of his personal physician, Conrad Murray. Conrad Murray actually had given Jackson a bunch of medications in an attempt to help him sleep, because he always had issues sleeping. One of those medications was this drip medication that you had to take with IV called propofol, I believe. But Conrad Murray said that he found Michael in his room not breathing and with a barely detectable pulse, and decided to administer CPR to no avail. But as a doctor, he was doing this on his bed, not even in a hard surface, which everyone knows you have to put someone on the floor at a hard surface while you're administering CPR. You know, after a while, he called 911 at around 12:21 p.m. And Jackson was treated by the paramedics at the scene. But, they couldn't do anything. And then they tried to continue to, treat him while they took him to the medical center. And I believe they used possibly a helicopter. I'm not even quite sure. Or they might have used a helicopter to move his body after he passed. But, they took him to Ronald Reagan UCLA Medical Center, and he was pronounced dead there at 2:21 p.m. 2:26 p.m. over in Los Angeles. The day before his birthday that year, August 28, 2016, the Los Angeles County Coroner concluded that his death was a homicide due to acute propofol and, excuse me if I pronounced this incorrectly, benzodiazepine intoxication. I'm probably pronouncing that totally incorrectly. But that last medication called benzodiazepines is an anti-anxiety pill. And he took 2 of those and was administered propofol. He also took lorazepam and midazolam at his home. And I might be, pronouncing that incorrectly, but I'm trying my best here, okay? But anyways, because it was called a homicide, people were saying, well, that means he has to be taken to court. And his doctor, Conrad Murray, because he's the one that administered this. And so Conrad Murray was convicted of involuntary manslaughter back in 2011, served only 2 years of his 4-year prison sentence, and was released for good behavior. The tricky thing here, to kind of go back to the moment where he passed, when Conrad Murray checked if he checked on him and entered his room, Jackson was not breathing. His body was still warm, but he had a weak pulse. And Murray said that he tried to revive Michael for 5 to 10 minutes, and he realized that he needed help. But what hindered him was there was no landline on the phone, and he could not use his cell phone to call 911, he said, because he didn't know the exact address. But the thing is, though, is that, they have systems available to kind of make you, they can find you. It's easier if you know your address, but a lot of times these people can find where you are with a few minutes, with a little bit of time, you know what I mean? So I kind of, it's a little concerning. Was he trying to clean up? Was he trying to set things up so it wouldn't look so bad? You know what I mean? It's just a little bit concerning. But anyway, Murray said that he phoned security, didn't get an answer, and finally he ran downstairs and yelled for help, and told the chef to bring security into the room. And by the time security called 911, Murray stated that at least 30 minutes had passed. So when kind of using this time, it's going to be tricky because so much time had passed. We don't know exactly when Michael passed away. His body was still warm and there was still a slight pulse. Do you count that as being alive still? You know what I mean? It's a little bit tricky what time we should use on his death. So, like I said before, the ambulance was called around 12:21. I guess what I would do is say 11:51 was, when they found him. And then I'll use that as one death time. And then I'll actually use the time that they pronounced him dead when they stopped trying to revive him, which was around 2:26. Okay, so 11:51 and 2:26 is what I'm going to use for his death time. That's so wild though, because he's saying at least. What if it was more? It's just really so frustrating. But what makes me feel a little bit what makes me feel something is that a pulse was still there. So maybe if the right time like if they got him at the right time, then he could have been still alive. Like that goes to show you, what is death? When is it when you die? You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. This makes it really, really hard to figure that out, and to kind of figure out, like, when do you actually die? Is it when you stop breathing? Is it when your pulse stops? Is it when your body is cold? It makes you think, right? Situations like this. But in this case, the ambulance was called at 12:21 and they reached Michael at 12:26. See how fast they came? If he just called the ambulance when he first did it, like a half an hour had fucking passed, dude. The ambulance arrived to the hospital at 1:14 and they tried to resuscitate Michael for an hour. They were unsuccessful, and he ended up being pronounced dead at 2:26, which I think 2:26 is a very, very important time. The wild thing too is before they even made it to the hospital, the paramedics performed CPR for 42 minutes at his house. He still wasn't waking up. And they said that he was in full cardiac arrest. Insane, y'all. So it kind of makes you think, like, if he just would not get up, like, when did he die? Did he die before Conrad Murray found him? Did he die? Even though his pulse was still there? Like, I don't know, man. I don't know. What is death? You know what I mean? What is death? And actually, as I look back now, I was right. The ambulance took him by car, the ambulance truck, to the hospital, but his body was flown by helicopter to the coroner's office, and that's when they end up doing a 3-hour autopsy the next day. And actually, the crazy thing is the Jackson family arranged for a second autopsy, without the coroner being involved, which I understand, because from these other deaths, the people be setting up shit and making mistakes, but also kind of cleaning their hands of certain situations. You know what I mean? The preliminary autopsy said that there was no foul play, but August 28th, they actually ruled it a homicide, which is interesting. I wonder what was involved in that. When they did his autopsy, the most significant drugs was the propofol and the lorazepam. The least significant drugs was midazolam, diazepam, lidocaine, and ephedrine. And I don't know what the fuck these drugs are, honestly. And I know with certain medications, they are used for multiple things. I know the midazolam is used for trouble sleeping. It's kind of like a sedation. Diazepam is a calming kind of effect type of drug that's used for anxiety. Lidocaine is used for numbing tissue in a specific area, and it performs like nerve blocking. I don't know exactly what that would be used for him. And ephedrine is used for low blood pressure to kind of stop it. Can also be used for necrolepsy and asthma. So again, like, he had a lot of sleeping issues, and he was taking a lot of medication for sleeping issues. Definitely too much, and I can understand them seeing this as kind of like a malpractice homicide situation. It was very, very neglectful on the medication that they gave him. That's a lot of medication for just like sleeping for the most part, even though someone was to kind of lower his anxiety. But if that's more sedating people more and more, of a person more and more and more. So I don't know. I'm not a doctor. I can't say, but that is just a lot of drugs. other than that, like, Michael was healthy. He had like some lung issues where his lungs were always inflamed, but the autopsy report showed that had nothing to do with his death at all. He was pretty small. He's 5'9" and weighed 136 pounds, which is really skinny, but believe it or not, the Associated Press was saying that his weight was in acceptable range, believe it or not, which sounds crazy, but they're saying that it's acceptable range for someone that's 5'9" in his age, which was 50. So with all that being said, this is like probably the longest intro that I did. What's up with this? You know what I mean? Do y'all think that he did mean to do that on purpose? Was it a pure accident? Did you think that he tried to kill him for personal reasons, or was it a setup and he was involved? Was a huge conspiracy? Who knows? The crazy thing is that Murray practiced out of Houston, and the clinic was raided during an investigation for this, but he also was shut down in Houston, and that's why he ended up leaving and being like kind of more of a personal physician than anything. Let's do the typical thing that I usually do. Luckily, we do have a birth time for Michael, so we can really get deeper into, what his birth chart said how he might die. You know what I mean? But let's look at his birth chart. Do the typical shit. Then look at his possible death charts. Again, the death charts that I'm gonna be looking up into is when he was found, possibly, approximately when he was found by Conrad Murray, which was Thursday, June 25th, 2009 at 11:51 a.m. possibly, and then when they pronounced him dead, which was same day but 2:26 p.m. They spent literally hours trying to resuscitate him. God bless them, and they couldn't, unfortunately. So let's look at that and see what we can get from there. What I'll also do too is, like, it looks like for sure that he died that day. If I think he died earlier, then he would have been cold by that time. So we're just gonna stick with the whole June 25th vibe, and what I'll also look at is transit and progressions for that date, and kind of show it, like, compare it to his birth chart too. Okay. All right, guys. So let's get started. Alright, guys, so let's take a look at Michael's natal chart. Michael is a Virgo sun, Pisces ascendant, and Pisces moon. So spiritual. How cool is that, y'all, right? So yeah, he had a pretty cool chart here. No intercepting signs, it looks like, so that's pretty lit. And it almost happened a couple of times too, but nope. He's like, not today, hoes. Not today. So, great. Let's look at the fourth house first, right? Remember how I said some astrologers look at the fourth house to learn a little bit more about the death, to see if there's any connections there, because it's the most lowest part of the chart, the private part of the chart, but people really don't know that much about, all that. So, his fourth house ruler is in Gemini. He does have Lackey in his fourth house, in Cancer. So it means like, I can see that as someone who was nurturing him, taking care of him, giving him emotional support is the one that's going to kill him. Cancer represents mother, but I can't imagine his mother doing that to him. So I kind of see this more as a caretaker killing him. That's what I see with Lachesis in his 4th house in Cancer, but his 4th house ruler is in Gemini. So with that, having to do something in pairs with his body, something with his hands, something with his lungs, something with his arms. Maybe the propofol being, it's like, I think it's like you have to take it like an IV, right? When don't you have to take propofol like that? So maybe it was in one of his arms. Could have been that, maybe. Let's look at the 4th house ruler though. It's 4th house rules by Gemini. Gemini rules Mercury, and Mercury, where is Mercury? Where is Mercury? In the 6th house. So that shows his health was involved in his death. Everyone's health is involved in his death, but it's like a sickness, you know what I mean? Interesting. And it's conjunct a lot of stuff. Mercury is conjunct Palace, which means there was like detail into this, possibly planned to make it seem like an accident maybe, but people were kind of like, I could see this people scattering, trying to clean up the details or make sure they have their stories right, or there's planning involved, or people looking into the details, or this can be people investigating his death. Because remember how at first they were saying there was no foul play, and they're like, maybe there was, you know what I mean? So maybe looking to see if it was voluntary manslaughter, involuntary manslaughter, something like that. His Mercury was retrograde, so that kind of does show that, you know, he couldn't speak up on it. He was unconscious. Like, there's nothing that he could do. Maybe he wasn't aware of what was going on at the moment. And I wouldn't count it conjuncting Venus, though. It's a little bit too far from Venus. It's 8 degrees away from Venus, so I wouldn't count that. This was conjuncting, however, Pars of Fortune. So I wonder how, I mean, the Pars of Fortune is like the thing that you naturally do that brings you luck, but you have to be of that energy, right? So he had to be of the energy of Leo in the 6th, kind of being self-expressive when it comes to his routine, being self-expressive when it comes to his health. But if he's unconscious, then he can't. So maybe that could be in connection with that. It is also conjuncting Pluto. And that's death right there, transformation, transition. Transforming from the earthly realm to the spiritual realm. Could be connected to someone that he was intimate with, but that would have been out there somehow. So I think that's just representing death for him. And because Pluto was in Virgo when he was born, the death is caused by like a health mishap, something with his health. You know what I mean? Something in his routine that was wrong. So that's what I'm getting from that. We can see if any other aspects are popping off for Mercury. Mercury is square Taurus, square Mars, which is really interesting. I wonder if they saw. See, that makes me wonder what some aggression was involved in his death. You know what I mean? Was he angry during his death, possibly? Was someone angry around him? Like, did he catch that energy? It's interesting too because Mercury is also trining South Node, so maybe something similar happened in his past life, and the energy just easily flowed into this transition from his last transition or a previous transition he had in his past life. But with that Mars, that's a bit tricky. This makes me think that maybe, I know when you administer CPR, it's very gruesome. Like, and your ribs can be bruised and fucked up really bad from someone trying to literally save your life. Like, people break ribs if CPR is administered to them. So maybe it represents that. I kind of wonder if any other... I mean, they did the autopsy and then, like, no other... Like, they didn't find any other, markings on him or him getting hurt. But maybe... I don't know. Like, I remember LaToya Jackson, his sister, saying that, like... You know, that she thinks that a lethal dose of drugs was given to him on purpose, which is like aggressive but not aggressive at the same time. You know, Taurus does represent you slowly, like things slowly happening, you kind of doing it in a way where you make sure everything is covered and everything's done. Maybe they meant to do this, like they planned this all along to somehow get into his money, because this is in Taurus and in the second house Mars is. So maybe that's it, you know what I mean? She did say too that she believes that her brother was murdered for his music catalog. So I don't know, man. LaToya, like, people try to put her out as a kook, but she says stuff and I think she tells the truth and then she's scared and says no, never mind. You know what I mean? I think that's what happens to her a lot. So, you know, she didn't fall back on this, and she's fought hard for her brother. She's one of the few siblings that was in constant contact with him. So I think if out of anybody, she would know. But it's just interesting that everyone in the entire family believes that he was murdered, and this was planned. So Mars, like, when I see Mars, I think of like literal aggression, like you pushing forward and pulling that aggression physically. With Taurus, you think, since it's the bull, it would do that. But, you think of the bull, right? It takes a while to agitate the bull, but then what you do, it will ram and like fuck your ass up. Not like the ram's like easily agitated. Like, it takes the bull a while. So maybe that's what it was. Like, they planned this out and then they just attacked. But the thing that's kind of getting me here is that, like, he wasn't like hit or anything. Like, he didn't get like physically harmed in a direct way. So that's why I'm like so iffy with the fourth house sometimes. Like, I don't know. Yeah, let's see what else is popping here. What's interesting here is that Mercury is opposite of his Chiron in the 12th house. It's Chiron's in Aquarius in the 12th house, and Aquarius represents your friends, but also just your circle. And so it shows that he had childhood traumas dealing with his friends, the people around him, his circle, and them kind of maybe, since it's in the 12th house, encouraging his self-sabotaging ways and the self-undoing. So just having a whole bunch of yes men. So that being opposite of his fourth house ruler can be saying that caused his health to decline, especially with his fourth house ruler being in the 6th. You know what I mean? A whole bunch of yes men letting him kind of do things that was to his detriment, instead of literally being a doctor and telling him that no, you should not take propofol. You should not take this many drugs. You're not a doctor. You don't know, and I'm going to tell you what to do. You know what I mean? What's interesting here is that this Mercury, the fourth house ruler, is also trine Saturn, conjunct his MC. So like a big power over his career might have done this. And I know his family wanted to sue the people who was covering this as AEG. May have been accidental, may have not been, may have been connected with Sony. I know he had beef with Sony. But, that's interesting how the big power is conjuncting his fourth house cusp, fourth house ruler. That's really planetary ruler. That's really, really interesting. Makes me think that maybe it was they were involved in his death, you know. Really interesting. His fourth house ruler also square Jupiter just does show that, like, you know, he can't tour, because I think that this is it. Tour is supposed to be only international, and I think only one, like maybe one place in the US was supposed to start in London, so it did cut that off. And Jupiter is like right near the 8th house cusp too, so maybe even if like he survived this and went to London, he still would have passed it's somewhere over there from the same thing. Or maybe, especially because North Node is also conjunct the 8th house ruler too. Or maybe that he would have went through another transformation if he turned his life around that would have benefited him somehow, you know. Yeah, real interesting stuff here. Really interesting. Let's look over at his 6th house. His 6th house is loaded. He has a 6th house stellium that is wild, and he's a Virgo too, so it's kind of funny. But he has Uranus. When you're talking about like the planets, he has Uranus, Venus, Mercury, Pluto, and Sun. 5 planets in the 6th house, and he has like asteroids here too. He has Juno. He has Pars of Fortune, which is not an asteroid but a point. He has Pallas, and he has Dark Moon Lilith here. So funny that he has Dark Moon Lilith in the 6th, because it kind of shows that you know, with Dark Moon Lilith, Uranus is here as conjuncting it, as well as Venus. I wonder because he is more he's a man for sure, and I believe he was heterosexual, but again, he's a feminine energy. Now I want to stress this again and again and again. You know, feminine energy and masculine energy has nothing to do with sexuality or you know, stuff like that. Like, it has to deal with just the type of energy. Are you receptive, or are you more of a assertive type of energy? You get what I'm saying? I feel like he's more feminine, so maybe a masculine energy was trying to set revenge onto him by hurting his health, making it seem like it was random. Since Uranus is conjuncting here, it does show that he has random things happen to him within his health, so it made it seem like it was normal. And then, you know, Venus is here too, so that, you know, they just planned this really well. Like, yeah, you do want to get better, right? This drug will help. Like, it's making it seem like he desired this thing, like he was into taking pills, which he was, but they was like, okay, he's into taking pills, he's a painkiller addict, so let's just kill him through, you know, making it seem like he overdosed on something when he, you know, when we actually were really involved in it. Just a thought to throw out there, okay? But Dark Moon Lilith here is really interesting. It's not making any aspects though to the 6th house cusp, but I just wanted to add that there because it might be something to consider if I see a similar story kind of panning out here, okay? With Pallas and Mercury conjunct too, I really feel like this was planned somehow. The details were important, and that people were pretty detailed about his health, and he was detailed about his health. Like, he might have known, because, you know, he had to go to private doctors and have private physicians all the time. He might have known certain lingo, certain things that he needed to know involving his health. Like, he was just really involved in his health. To maybe even his detriment, thinking that he needs something when he really doesn't. You get what I'm saying? Mercury retrograde. He's so Mercury retrograde because he was so quiet. So that makes a lot of sense, you know? But yeah, that's what I'm kind of thinking there. Pluto and Pars of Fortune are like degrees within each other. So he usually had health. He probably had a close call that happened, something similar to his transition, where he almost died and he got revived and no one knew. You know what I mean? But this time it didn't work out in his favor because, Pluto empires of fortunes in Virgo. You need to, maybe the saying he was not being on top of his health like he should have been. And so it didn't work in his favor this time. Then Sun is in his 6th house too. Like, his routine, his organization, his attention to detail is highlighted here. That's what he was known for. That's what he was good at. And it looked like for it to not work out, for it to work out the way it did, it's like he something messed up somewhere. You know what I mean? He's usually on top of his health, but he wasn't this time, or something interrupted him being on top of his health. Could have been a killer. Who knows, right? Well, that's interesting. But his 6th house ruler is Leo. His planetary ruler of Leo is Sun, and his Sun is conjunct Pluto. So he went through a lot of transition within his health, and when it comes to his transitions from Earth to spirit world, it would involve his health, his routine. You know what I mean? So, and that ended up being true. But what's interesting is his Sun is conjunct Juno. I remember him having a life partner at the time. I felt like that would have came out by now since he passed. It's been almost 10 years. But who knows, right? Maybe he needed a life partner to help him get on top of things and to be that voice of reason. That could be it too. I wonder if his health was better when he was married. He was married twice to Lisa Marie Presley. I forgot her. I don't know if it's Lisa Marie or Marie Lisa. I think it's Lisa Marie. I wonder if she helped him be on top of his health and take care of himself, and his other wife, Debbie, I forgot her last name as well. I wonder if they helped him with his health, made sure his vitality was high, he was taking care of himself. Maybe he needed that. That's what I'm seeing here. It's sad because he longed for a life partner that would fit for him. He wanted that transformative love, that kind of twin flame, knock you off your feet, the love that he sung about. That's what he really wanted, especially too with Juno. Of course, Juno's Sun and Pluto conjunct, and it's also conjuncting his DC, right, his descendant. But also too because he is a Pisces moon, Pisces rising. They can't really connect with you if it's not on a spiritual level. So, poor thing. That sucks. And he wanted someone that he could relate to. That's how you get to intimacy with him. If you can relate with him, pick his brain, have a lot of one-on-one time, stuff like that. Since his 8th house ruler is in Libra. That's poor baby. I feel bad for him. Let's look at the other aspects of his 6th house ruler, his planetary 6th house ruler, before we move and get started with that. I already talked about his Sun conjunct DC, but his Sun is also opposite his ascendant. So he may have had this carefree way of being, that people thought that he was just carefree with his health as well, and kind of just go with the flow, but he actually was a stickler when it came to his health, believe it or not. That's what he identified with, routine, organization. So he seemed like this free spirit, but he was actually a bit of a stickler, honestly, when it came to his health. So it's kind of shocking how this happened, and it makes me think that something was involved. It could have been an accident, but it's just weird how now something's weird. But it's just, you have to think about Pisces energy too. They like to escape. maybe he escaped a little bit too much. It could have been an accident, but let's look a little bit more. His sun is also in conjunct Chiron, so there's that Chiron again. Yes, men were involved in his death, you know. Was involved in his vitality being off. They're not directly involved, you know, because it's in conjunct energy we're talking about, but you know, it was indirect. You know what I mean? They were enablers. You get what I'm saying? And then lastly, you know, his sun is square his Saturn and his MC. So again, a high authority was connected to his vitality being off. They didn't help with his vitality. That's what I see it as. More that, you know, this higher power didn't, you know, care about his vitality. They maybe just cared about the status, the recognition that they would get, since Saturn is near the MC. Being very careless with the Sag energy. Not that Sag energy is careless, but they go with their passions. They go with what they want. You know what I mean? While his vitality is kind of like suffering, you know, they're just doing what they want. So if you're ever wondering that, I believe it's AEG. If you're wondering if they are negligent over his death, then yes, you know, and it could have been another higher power that was negligent within his death too. Higher material, like world, earthly world power, not higher power spiritually. Okay. All right, now let's look at his 8th before we move forward with his death chart. His 8th house ruler is Libra. And so it's ruled by Libra, so that shows like a partnership, someone that he was compatible with, fight with, trusted, could have been involved in his transformation and his death. Jupiter's here, so it's someone of higher knowledge. There's the doctor, Conrad Murray, someone of higher knowledge that he was partnered with was involved in his death. That could represent somebody else as well, but as I see Conrad Murray here. He had higher knowledge of the medical world and medical stuff, so yes, it seems like he was negligent. Neptune is also conjunct Jupiter, so he used drugs. He used medicine to do this. The thing is, though, is that Neptune's in Scorpio. Requiem is also conjunct here. Requiem is about not death, but the funeral services afterwards. So that's interesting. But with it being in Scorpio, there's some secretive shit going on. Maybe he didn't do this by accident. Maybe this was purposeful. He wanted to do this. I don't know if AEG is involved in this, if it was him personally wanting to do this or what, but I kind of feel that he might have done this on purpose, y'all. Let's look a little bit more at the 8th house ruler to see what's up with that. So the 8th house ruler is Libra. Libra's ruled by Venus. Venus is in the 6th house, and yep, it affected his health. This situation did, so that makes sense, right? Again, Venus is conjunct Dark Moon Lilith, y'all. Dark Moon Lilith is revenge, but it's also conjunct Uranus, and Uranus can show up as accidents, but it can show up as unconventional ways of doing things. So this is really unconventional, making it seem like it's an accident when it wasn't, you know. With Dark Moon Lilith being closer to Venus, though, this might have been some type of payback. Michael Jackson was a great businessman, knew the business world in and out. Of course, he was in the music business since he was like 7 or 8. So of course he would know it. But I heard he could be not like ruthless as in like fucked up and backstabbing, but he got what he wanted. and maybe people didn't like that. You get what I'm saying? And people know of the times that he spoke up against people using folks in the music industry, these higher corporations and businesses using artists and treating them real fucked up. So something to think about. This is tricky. So I mean, again, like, Uranus represents surprise. It represents accidents, unexpectedness, but it does also represent sudden changes and shock, and personal freedom and rebellion. Maybe he felt like he was free if he were to do this. It's interesting. So it makes you think, like, is this a payback situation, or is it was it an accident? Was it both? Did he want to pay him back but didn't really mean to? Like, you know what I mean? This might have been just negligence, y'all, but the Dark Moon Lilith part is really, I don't know, man. We'll have to look at his death chart to see a little bit more about that. But let's see other aspects of Venus. Venus is exactly semi-sextile to Vesta, keeper of the earth. So may have been higher power, a higher power not in the spiritual world but in the earthly world. Could have been. Maybe Uranus in here because they wanted to make it seem like it was an accident. You know what I mean? Maybe. Carelessness is shown too because Venus is also semi-sextile Ceres. So there was like no nurturing, no care. They weren't, it seems like, that shows the negligence that they weren't trying to help him for real. You know what I mean? Yeah. Anubis is sextile Libra. A partner was involved in his death. So he won't have to be self-expressive anymore and is losing his creativity. Venus is also squared Mars. Similar to Mercury squared Mars. It's not good energy to see. Showing again there's an aggressor here, and it's been something that was planned. Again, that yes man vibes with Venus opposite Chiron, and Michael dying helps the groups that were investing in the This Is It tour. They felt like they probably got more money out of it with him dying than through the actual tour with Venus, which is the 8th house ruler, planetary ruler, trined Saturn and MC. They probably felt like we're getting more money with him dead than alive, so this is working out in our favor. Like, they probably didn't even give a fuck about him dying at all. And they was just thinking about their pockets. They didn't have no sentiments about it at all. So yeah, that's what I'm seeing, y'all. I talked about Pluto and talked about Saturn and talked about Mars because it was heavy within his chart anyway, so I didn't even have to go deeper into that. But what I'll do is look at his death chart in the next segment, the multiple death charts, and also the progressions and transits compared to his natal chart. Let's see if we can get more info. Okay, y'all? All right. All right, y'all. So let's take a look at Michael's death chart. So he has a Cancer sun, which shows that, again, not everyone that dies in Cancer season has someone nurturing them and taking care of them. But I think That is something to account for in this reading. He has a Leo moon, which is interesting in itself too, because the moon represents the back, but it also can represent the heart as well. And he did have a cardiac arrest. And then lastly, he has a Virgo rising, which does show that his health was failing in this. So interesting thing is that usually the rising sign shows where, like, how exactly you were hurt. To have Virgo as the rising sign is strange, because Virgo usually kind of is focused on the digestive system and the stomach, which I can't see how that was involved in his death, but you never know. It could have been the root issue of his death. I do know that Virgos are very nervous, and they're very nerve-wracking with how they kind of go about things. So that could be something. His nerves were all over the place. But again, Virgo represents digestion, which includes intake, mostly food intake and stuff like that. But it could be that it was the medicine intake, or it could have been something that he ate with the medicine that actually got him there. I don't know if they looked that far into it, but it's definitely something that could have caused an issue here. Another thing that I've noticed too is that Saturn and Ceres is conjunct his rising sign. Saturn definitely does show restriction. So it is some restriction within his health, which caused him death. And then Ceres shows that there was someone that was supposed to be taking care of him and watching him, but there was restriction within that because it's also conjunct Saturn. So somehow the person that was supposed to take care of him had restrictions, didn't have the authority to take care of him, and caused him harm, caused him to die, which is a little wild and strange within itself, but definitely something that you need to take into account for sure. All right. So if you kind of look at another thing too, is that he's a Virgo sun, but he was around like 6 or 7 degrees Virgo, and that's in the 12th house. So it does show not only confusion, but like kind of the unknownness of it all. We didn't know how he died. It was really a big confusion still to this day. And his vitality is unknown. The sun represents your vitality. So his natal sun is in the 12th house. It's very interesting. It kind of shows that his vitality was gone when they found him. Yeah, some of his body's functions was still going on, but he passed by this time. He was already gone. So I'm really comfortable using this chart as his death chart. It's probably a little bit off by a bit, but I'm really comfortable using this chart. This is probably the best one we can get, unless we can have a specific time on when he literally stopped breathing. But this is probably the best that we will be able to get, honestly. So that's really interesting there. Saturn in the 12th in general shows too, he had no authority at all. He was unconscious. There was nothing that he can do. So yeah, there's that. The interesting thing too is, like, I usually would see the Virgo or the rising sign as, your death, and maybe the 7th house or the 7th house ruler or the descendant as the culprit who caused your death. It's in Pisces, so it shows that drugs causes death, confusion causes death, him being deluded causes death. So it could be, like he was involved in his death, but there was still some neglect there, I believe. The reason why I say that, it's like, okay, he was involved in his death because, listen, he had, his rising signs in Virgo, and no, it's not making any aspects to his natal sun, but still that kind of shows his vitality. And then his rising sign, his descendant, his natal rising, is in Pisces, 10 degrees Pisces. So it's not actually making any aspects to his descendant of his death chart. But again, it's showing it's him that was involved in this death. Like he had a hand into it, whether he would want to admit it or not, unfortunately. But there's other parts of this chart that shows that, again, there was other people involved in this, and that it caused his death. I might not even get as thorough as I normally would in this reading, because it's the answers are right here. It's no confusion, honestly. Let's look at his 6th house, right? He has this crazy ass like stellium in his 6th, with Chiron, Neptune, Jupiter, Vertex, and Osiris all within like 1 or 2 degrees within each other. Chiron's on 25 degrees, Neptune's in 26 degrees, Jupiter's at 26 degrees, Vertex at 27 degrees, Osiris at 27 degrees. He literally was destined. It was a fated event that he was either going to meet death or be close to death. Osiris is retrograde. He probably felt that he was dying all along and something funny was going to happen. And he probably did this tour to kind of put himself out there, make sure his kids were good before that happened. Having Jupiter here in the 6th house, again, I believe that represents Conrad Murray. He was the person of higher learning, the person that knew what to do when it came to his health, which is represented by the 6th house. Is in Aquarius. All these are in Aquarius, and the last decan of Aquarius, which is ruled by Venus. And so with that, like, again, he's getting his desires. His desires are above his health in this case. And they're doing unconventional, weird things that they usually don't do with patients to make sure Michael's desires were met. But Neptune's involved. That does definitely include the whole, drugs, delusion and stuff. But it could also include that, like, because Neptune and Jupiter is so close to each other that, it is so tricky. Like, at the end of the day, yes, Michael had his hand in his death, but they were not only enabling him, they were kind of like, well, if he dies, I kind of feel like that had something to do with it. And he was going through his Chiron return, which is wild, because Chiron was in Aquarius. That's where his natal Chiron is. And so again, this yes men, oh my fucking God, this is crazy. The yes men were involved in this, and his Chiron was in retrograde. He knew this was happening, and he was thinking it through, but he wasn't he wasn't being external and telling his yes men, listen, I need you to help me. I can't have you tell me yes. He was kind of going through that and understanding that more in the internal, but not in the external. And his Chiron return kind of catalyzed his death. It's just fucking crazy. It's wild. It's wild, man. And then his Chiron was 19 degrees Aquarius, so it hit the exact moment. I wouldn't be surprised if that was the moment where he's like, I'm about to die soon. I would not be surprised. Anubis is near there. Is at 14 degrees Aquarius in Requiem. Shit, y'all. This is wild as fuck. This is wild as fuck. He felt like his disease, his addiction was gonna get to him. He had all these yes men, and he was, again, they were enabling him, but they were I think they kind of was like, well, if he dies, then we're set. You know what I mean? I feel like that was the case. Interesting thing too, North Node and RIP were conjunct in his 5th house. 5th house, the house of creativity. Also, it represents too his children. His children had to deal with his death. Requiem's in the 5th house, again having to deal with his burial and everything, his services. But North Node conjunct RIP almost just exactly. North Node's at 0 degrees in 22 minutes. RIP is 0 degrees 23 minutes. This was fated. He was supposed to die this way, and it was supposed to be a lesson for him, his soul. I don't think he's coming back on Earth, honestly. He was too much big of a star and had too much power, in the sense of power over his people, over his fans, and his fans ran deep. He probably will ascend to like a oversoul or something similar to that. But I don't think he's gonna come back to Earth. But he do have some lessons still to be learned. So he's not gonna ascend like a Harriet Tubman's probably fully ascended. You get what I'm saying? Like a great example of ascension, like for real, is Metatron. He was a human and he's an archangel. Like that's true ascension. Like when you're all the way up there and you're really important. You know what I mean? Yes, he went through an ascension, but it's not as real. And I think a great indicator of that is to have Saturn in your 12th when you die. You know what I mean? Shit, man, it's all right here, y'all. It's all fucking right here. This is wild. Yeah, I'm not even have to go to the 4th house. The 4th house ain't really telling me shit. And it leads me back to the 6th anyway, because the 4th house ruler is in Sag, and Sag is ruled by Jupiter. So it brings me back there anyway. You know, fucking Jupiter is retrograde. That shows that, you know, that I felt Jupiter being retrograde, he knew what he was doing. He kept it quiet. He knew what he was doing. He was being neglectful. He knew what he was doing and he kept it quiet. He was going to get something out of Michael's death, y'all. For real. 4th house. If I go into the 4th house, is Pluto retrograde. Again, secretive death. They was trying to keep this on the down low, for real. And there's more shit to it. There's more shit to this, y'all. I don't think we're ever going to find out what it is either. Looking at his 7th house, I usually don't look at the 7th house when it comes to this, but the reason why I am is because, again, your 1st house is how you died. It represents your vitality, and the 7th house ruler represents the culprit, like who did this, you know? Yes, he was involved in doing this. Yes, drugs were involved in doing this. It even might have been a sort of an accident. It didn't mean it to happen that day, because Uranus is in here, right? Something came out of nowhere, unconventional happened. They're like, wait, what the fuck? How did this happen, right? And it's in the 3rd decan of Pisces, which is ruled by Pluto, which represents transition and death. But Juno is here too. Juno is life partner, which is weird. I wonder, somehow he was with somebody and they were involved in his death. I wonder if he had like a girlfriend. If anyone knows if Michael was with someone when he died and they're trying to keep a hush, let me know, because I keep seeing Juno. But Juno can also represent Conrad Murray because it's in the 7th house too. A life partner within his health, a life partner within his business. You know what I mean? Because 7th house represents business too. And this kind of shows that, like, he went to a quack. Like Conrad Murray's, I think he got his license taken away in Texas, didn't he? Or something like that. Something weird happened in Texas. He ended up moving. Now he's a personal physician for people, like someone as important as Michael Jackson. You know what I mean? Like, so it might have been an accident. It might have been neglectful, but they kind of wanted this all in all anyway. Uranus and what you call it, Juno's too close. Or it could have been that his life partner was supposed to be helping him in this. And if they were there where they were supposed to be, Conrad Murray would have found them too late. It could have been that too. That could be something. But let's actually look at his 8th house ruler. I don't even think I have to look at aspects like that. Like, it's kind of right there in our face. The 8th house ruler is in Aries, right? So this shows kind of self-afflicted a little bit. So if I were wondering someone would killed themselves, I would kind of look at Aries. Aries in the 8th house is that. But the thing is, though, it's like, what makes me kind of like with it is that because Aries could also represent a sudden death, which, yes, his was sudden. That shows that he died already when they got to him. It's just that some of his body functions were still working, but he been died by the time they got to him. Another thing too, it kind of represents someone was involved in his death. It was kind of like there was an aggressor there. It does represent that. It represents also something wrong with your brain or a head trauma. He didn't have head trauma, but remember, he was taking a whole bunch of drugs and he had an addiction, and there was a lot of Pisces and Neptune in his death chart and in his natal chart too. The thing that makes me think that it wasn't fully self-afflicted is, again, Dark Moon Lilith is showing up once again. Dark Moon Lilith is in the 8th house, right? So that shows that there was a fucking a revenge set out on him right? That's what dark moon ruler stands for, by a bigger masculine power, right? And it affected his body, which was Aries represents your personality, persona, and appearance, your literal body, right? And it caused him death, which is the 8th house. So yeah, they planned this. They planned this. It may have happened earlier than they expected, or not the way that they wanted, but they've been planning this on the low to make it seem like it was an accident. And so they were doing little bits of things to enable him, the yes men around him, thinking that they're gonna be taken care of once he died. Wouldn't be shocked at that. Straight up. That's so fucked up. That is so fucked up. They took advantage of a person who was sick, who had a painkiller addiction, who was struggling. That's so messed up, man. That's really sad. 12th house in general represents your weakness. And 12th house ruler I already said this, in Leo represents, back problems, which I believe he did have back problems and was taking painkillers for that. But also it represents your heart. He went to cardiac arrest. But that wasn't the main killer for him. It was the drugs. That, yes, he was involved in saying, yes, I want the drugs. But then they were enabling this. I feel like I don't have that much to say anymore, y'all. This was just easy to figure out. Sun in the 10th, this death was huge. But Vesta right near the sun, though, is kind of funky. It makes me think that this was a bigger scheme. It was a conspiracy. And with Vesta not only conjuncting the sun, but with Cancer too, the doctor was in on it. Anthropos is in the 10th. Destiny was in the 10th. He was supposed to die this way, and it's supposed to be a lesson for him. And then Mercury also conjuncting the MC. People started combing through the details, like, what the fuck happened here? I feel like he had a lover, guys, and they were involved in this somehow too, with Juno. And then his 8th house planetary ruler is conjunct Venus. And finale. Did he have a boo, guys? I don't remember hearing that he had a boo. I feel like he had a boo and they were involved in this fuckery too. That's sad, y'all. That's so fucked up. I feel like I covered everything, but I'll still go through some of the stuff. Look at some of the aspects, maybe. Let me just look at Mars. Mars conjunct Venus, I told you. If he didn't have a boo, then again, they were going after his desires. This is what he wanted. He wanted the drugs. He wanted that comfort. This is Taurus and conjuncting in Taurus too. And then another thing as well is that, again, the 9th house is involved. This was involved with him traveling outside of the U.S., going outside, traveling long distance. But he probably would have died long distance too. This is supposed to happen. He probably would have died if he went out there too, died in London, if he didn't get his act together. He was supposed to go through some transformation around this time. Mars was also square Moon. A lot of anger, a lot of emotions during this time. He was mad. He probably was mad that it ended this way. He didn't want it to end this way, especially leaving his kids out there. He didn't, and he was within an 11th house. He was sad that he disappointed his fans too. He wanted to do this tour for some reason. If he might not wanted to do it, I really want to do this tour. This is fun, but he wanted to do this tour he had a reasoning for doing this tour. He felt bad for disappointing his fans and disappointing his kind of leaving his kids out there, because he had sole custody of his kids, and so he was the mother as well as the father. So the moon kind of represents that, but he was angry. Mars trine Saturn, he couldn't even his anger was restricted. He couldn't even express his anger. He was unconscious. Shows a bigger power probably was involved too. His caretaker, Ceres conjunct Saturn. His caretaker is his. It was Conrad Murray's fault. Like, it really was. They had every right to sue him. His family had every right to sue him. Every right, y'all. He was in on this. Even if it wasn't a conspiracy, like then he was neglectful. You know what I mean? Then you were neglectful. Fucking bastard. This is crazy, y'all. This is wild. All right, let's look at Pluto. Pluto is retrograde again. Secretive death, right? It's not making much aspects, honestly. It is opposite his sun, right? Vitality versus transition. Which one's gonna be chosen? You know? Obviously, we know the answer to that. Yeah, this is crazy, y'all. And it's also sextile that crazy ass stellium with Chiron, Jupiter, and Neptune, and Vertex and Osiris. Showing that, you know, they were involved in his death. Like, Conrad Murray was involved in his death at the end. With Sun conjunct Vesta, though, like, yeah, I think this was a bigger plan. Like, this was a bigger plan for something. I don't know if it succeeded or not. Maybe it didn't because of Pluto is opposite Vesta. It's in the 10th and the 4th house. So maybe with Vesta being in the 10th, that everything was exposed. So it kind of ruined everything. They ruined the plan. So it didn't go out perfectly as they wanted. But Vesta is combust Sun. Or the Sun is combusting Vesta. So it was going along well, but people could see everything. People see the bullshit. It was slightly exposed. Y'all, this is crazy. Crazy, y'all. Yeah. I feel like I kind of already bust this open. We can look at his 226 when they actually declared him dead. Libra is the rising sign. Libra is lower back and butt. So I don't understand how that was involved. So that makes me think that that really had nothing to do with his death, really. He didn't die then. But Libra does represent food processing. So that may be something like what you actually digesting food, not you intaking. So maybe him digesting those medicines fucked him up. And again, that whole partnership. It was his partner that got him hurt, that hurt him. Which reminds me of the Eazy-E thing. You know, a partner of his set him up, you know? And then that's the interesting thing about Libra, because it's not sexual partner, it's just partner. So if you had like a Scorpio rising in his death, then maybe. And that's why I don't think Eazy-E died the way he did. But let's go back to Michael. Just looking through here, y'all. Don't mind me. The good thing about it, though, like, since Venus rules Libra, that it was painless and peaceful. He was actually okay during the whole process. It didn't hurt him. But it's in Mercury. He was thinking a lot, and he was angry. He was. But he was mad that it just happened that way. Guys, look over to the descendant. Dark Moon Lilith is conjunct tightly to the descendant. This was revenge for something, y'all. This was revenge for something. They were mad at him for something. Jesus. With them declaring death at 226, that crazy ass Chiron, Jupiter, Neptune, Osiris, that whole aspect is in the 4th house. So again, they're keeping it real private, keeping it real secret, that it was his caretaker that gave him drugs and caused him death, and a whole bunch of yes men were involved. But also another thing that was included in the 4th house too is that RIP North Node conjunction, as well as the Requiem and Anubis conjunction. That's also in the 4th house, them keeping everything quiet. And they did keep the funeral services quiet too, so that makes a lot of sense. Pluto in the 3rd is interesting. I feel like they said finally he's shutting up, because he did a lot of speeches on how fucked up the industry was. They wanted him to shut up, and they did. And Pluto being in Capricorn, the powers that be were involved in this, I believe. 8th house is in Taurus. Taurus is ruled by Venus. Venus is in the 7th house. Again, partnership. Venus is also conjunct finale and Mars. Okay? And that he ingested something and it killed him. There was an aggressor involved. There's nothing else to say, y'all. I don't even have to look at anything else. It's right here. It's all right here. I don't even have to do anything else, honestly. This is wild. This is one of the more clearer readings that I did when it came to depth charts. This is wild, dude. This really did happen to him in his past life, because South Node is conjunct his MC here. Moon is in his 10th house. 2 people were so emotional when he died. This was like a big mess. Palace here. People were really trying to comb through the details, like what the fuck happened. Y'all. This is nuts. Crazy. If I were to look over to his progressions and transits to see if I see anything that cleared anything else up. Again, there goes that Jupiter, Chiron, Neptune transit near his natal Chiron and in his 12th house. So again, the yes men, Conrad Murray, gave him drugs, enabled him to kill, to get him to die. I don't want to say kill himself, it's just to die. And we're never gonna really understand the whole plan of why this happened unless we connect with him spiritually. We're not gonna find it while on earth. And that's why I know why his family is so hurt by this, and they feel like they should have got more time. They probably know something else is up and they can't do anything about it, and that is heartbreaking. Heartbreaking. Transit North Node was in the 11th. His fans were going nuts. They were heartbroken. And it's conjunct his progressed moon and progressed MC. So that shows that this is a fated event. Is actually supposed to signify something in his reputation, in his career. It was really emotional. Emotions were going nuts. People were going nuts. The whole situation was tumultuous. Pluto retrograde transit was in his 10th house, a transition over his career, over his reputation, over his status. People not calling him a molester no more. People not calling him a pedophile no more. Now they're giving him love finally. You know, and then also too, like, he got a better status, reputation, because it's in Capricorn. He always deserved that. But he was going to go through issues with his reputation and status. He had Saturn in the 10th. So he was going to go through that. You know what I mean? Saturn and Sag, like me too. He had Saturn in the 10th. He was going to go through issues with his reputation and status. It just was really hit him hard. Y'all. You know, what's wild is that, again, with this Juno, progressed Juno is conjunct Osiris, his natal Osiris and Vertex. I kind of feel like he was involved with someone and they kind of did some shady shit. Like a love affair. They were involved in this whole fiasco. I don't know who this person could be. Remember how I kept saying Conrad Murray was definitely involved, and I saw him as Jupiter since he had the higher learning. His progressed sun is right near that Jupiter in North Node. It's kind of like, see, that's him. I kind of think I'm kind of getting that vibe a little bit. Venus conjunct Anubis. Someone that he was involved with. It could have been just fucking around. Was involved in this. And this is his progressed Venus and progressed Sun, by the way. Transit Saturn is conjunct Ceres. The person that was taking care of him caused him to death, restricted him. Who was his partner, and it's in the 7th house. The powers that be were connected with this. Y'all, man, this is wild. And then, well, actually, that's not that bad. I'm gonna cut off that. Sorry. But what's wild too, this again, there's an aggressor involved because his progressed ascendant is conjunct his progressed Mars retrograde. And so there was an aggressor, but they were stealthy with it. I knew there was a Mars retrograde energy somewhere. That shows that there was an aggressor, but they didn't go out and punch him. They hurt him in a different way. There it is, y'all. I'm not gonna go in depth no more. Everything is right here. It says it right here. Conrad Murray was involved in his death. Yes, he was very negligent. They had a whole bunch of yes men. He was one of them that was saying, like, yes, take this drug. Yeah, do this, Michael. Michael's already going through an addiction, trying to fight it. Michael had a feeling that he needs to work on that, but he didn't, because addictions don't just work like that. You don't just be like, I don't want to be addicted no more. It doesn't work that way. They were planning to do this with him because they knew how he was when it came to just wanting to some sleep, wanting to be relaxed, wanting to chill. And they took advantage of it, thinking that they was going to get something out of it when he died. They probably didn't mean for him to die that way. They probably was sudden. It probably came out of nowhere, but they thought they was going to win out of this. And that's why it took him so long to actually call the cops. He was cleaning shit up. He lied. Because you still could call the police 911, and they would, try to find where you're at. You know what I mean? So that whole phone call thing was bullshit. Plain bullshit. Okay? And that's what it is. That's what it motherfucking is. Alright, let me do the last words, y'all. God bless the king of pop, y'all. What a fucking life. To be worked onto the bone, to bust your ass all, to end your life and your legacy the way that you did, with having people that you think you trust turn on you. It's absolute heartbreak. So, like I said before, this is what I think would happen. Mike was going through his Chiron return. His Chiron return was included with, him not realizing his self-sabotage ways and self-undoing, and his friends being yes men, his circle being yes men, right? He natally has that retrograde. And so he was kind of going through that. And I believe when he passed, it was retrograde as well. It was. And so it was actually going to go back to where, you know, it probably was going to go back until where his natal Chiron was. But he was definitely going through his Chiron return, right? So inwardly, he knew that he just had yes men, and he knew he needed to change his ways. He knew he needed to fix the addiction, painkiller addiction that he had. He knew he needed to do better for his family and for his kids. But again, this is addiction that we're talking about. It's not something that you could just snap and get out of. You know, some people it's easier for others, but it's hard. But these yes men, including Conrad Murray, they enabled him. And they also, you know, plan to get him, plan to get something out of him dying. You know what I mean? And his family knew. That's why it's like he was murdered. He was murdered. He was murdered for his music catalog. He was murdered for his money. He was murdered. You know what I mean? They're onto something, y'all. They were onto something, and they're right. It was all a plan. Conrad Murray got connected with some other folks, keeping his mouth shut, being the fall guy. But there is way more to this shit. With Vesta involved and Saturn deeply in here, there is way more to this shit. And they got him through his partners. That's why Juno's there. That's why Venus keeps showing up. That's why 7th house keeps showing up. That's terrible, man. And now his kids literally had to grow up with no parents. Their mother is not involved in their lives like that. It's just really, really sad. The fans lost a legend, an icon, the best who did it ever. Just really unfortunate. So let's please light a white candle, either energetically or for real, for Michael Jackson. God bless his soul. It's just sad that when you don't have no one to really trust like that, you know. Maybe he did have people who he trusted, but they, you know, he kind of pushed them away, because addictions can make you do that. You know what I mean? Push the right people away and the wrong people closer to you. Maybe that happened. Who knows? But it's just really unfortunate. Really, really unfortunate. What was y'all's favorite Michael Jackson song? That's what I would like to know. Mine's change often. But you know what I like a lot? I like I Can't Help It from Off the Wall. I love that song so much. It's so good. How did that song go? Like, I'm trying to think. I keep thinking of the second verse instead of the first verse. Looking in my mirror took me by surprise. I can't help but see you running often through my mind. Helpless like a baby, sensual disguise. I can't help but love you, yeah. It's getting better all the time. I can't help it if I wanted to. I can't help it, maybe if I could. I can't help it if I wanted to. I couldn't help it, no. Can't help it if I wanted to. I couldn't help it, even if I could. I can't help it if I wanted to. We're helping, no. I can't help it if I wanted to. Even if I could, I can't help it if I wanted to. We're helping, no, no. I can't help it if I wanted to. Even if I could, I can't help it if I wanted to. We're helping, no, no, no. Do 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 do. Da 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 da. That's my shit, y'all. I love that song so much. Oh, Michael. oh man, so sad. It's just sad. It really sad. It was someone with just an amazing legacy. Oh, speaking of, I couldn't help it. Do you know, like, Stevie Wonder helped, like, he helped write that song? He wrote that song? I think him, I forgot who, someone else did too, but he was involved in writing that song. Who is another genius. I love Stevie. Stevie is the motherfucking best ever. Oh my God. So great. But anywho, this is it, y'all. Wow. I didn't mean to even say that. Like that. It's interesting. But God bless him. I wish Michael the very best in the etheric world, the astral world. He deserves it. What a beautiful, giving soul. Literally the most philanthropic, I think, person alone. And he gave a lot quietly too, like anonymously. So a lot, like there's a way he gave way more and no one even really knew it. Helped bury a lot of soulful artists who ended up broke because, you know, their family didn't champion them the way that Joe did, you know, and didn't have the support that Michael had. So at least the music business support, right? Anywho, I'm going to end it here. I hope you guys have a beautiful, beautiful Saturday, and I'll see you tomorrow. All right. Peace.
The podcast you just heard was published with Anchor. Got something you want to say to the creator of this show? Send them a voice message using the Anchor app, free for iOS and Android.